What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten at Defining Dadbod, excited to bring you another informative and helpful episode of the show. And today's episode is an important one for dads: how to work out while sleep deprived. I want to start this whole thing off by saying congratulations to my brother-in-law who just had his first bouncing baby boy a couple days ago, and now he has transitioned from being a man and a husband to a father. And if you had him in a room of dads and you said, hey guys, we're going to go around the room and just give him some advice and some encouragement and some inspiration, at least half of the advice and encouragement would have something to do with how to deal with the intense sleep deprivation he's about to experience over the next year. Now, sleep deprivation is a fact of life for a parent. It's crazy because when I started in the fitness industry about 12 years ago, I remember talking to people about how important sleep was, and it wasn't until I became a father that I realized that sometimes you just can't sleep well, period. I had been preaching to the choir for the vast majority of my career. So we brought our little guy home, and every 2 or 3 hours, he would wake up screaming and crying, and me trying to be a good husband to my wife, who was exhausted from childbirth and recovering from that whole bit, and all of her hormones are crazy. I would get up and I would go grab him and bring him to her so she could breastfeed him and then put him back down in bed. And so if I'm sitting in a room with my brother-in-law, I would say, hey man, prepare to be a shell of your former self. You have no idea the Navy SEAL style sleep deprivation training you're about to go through. You're going to feel stupid and you're going to feel out of control in your life, and I can't help you with that. But what I can do for you, and what my son did for me, was spur me to look at all the research I could possibly find on how to work out while sleep deprived. And this episode is about not just those of you who are new fathers and are about to go through a special forces level of sleep deprivation training, but also those of you who have ever worked a really late night, maybe suffered from some insomnia, had something troublesome go down that kept you up so that you couldn't get the rest that you needed to. Today we're going to cover the do's and don'ts when it comes to exercise in a sleep deprived day, week, or few months in the case of you new fathers. These are the guidelines that you can follow in order that exercise can be a habit that stays alive for you so it doesn't fall by the wayside while you're in a position to not sleep very well. So first things first, before we get to the do's and the don'ts, let me make something very clear. The magic of a workout happens when you recover from that workout. If you've been following the show for a while, you know that we work out and then the magic of our workout happens. The adaptations happen when we sleep well that night and subsequent nights thereafter. So a good workout doesn't stop working when you get off the treadmill or put the weights down. It's the adaptations of our connective tissue, our muscles, our nervous system, our metabolic rates, our hormonal system. It's the adaptations that happen because of the recovery after the workout that makes working out great for us. Now, here's the thing about being sleep deprived or working out in a period of time when you're not able to sleep as much. You are not going to recover very well. In fact, I tell everybody that while you're sleep deprived, exercise is not about making some sort of progress. You're not going to make significant changes in your body composition. You're not going to significantly increase strength or power output. You're not going to get a whole bunch more flexible. You're not going to get much more coordinated, and you're certainly not going to be able to learn a bunch of new moves. And that's simply because you're not going to recover well from the exercise bout. And so that being said, you might ask, well, why exercise at all if I'm sleep deprived? And there's a lot of research out there that recommends if you're sleep deprived, you should stop working out completely. In fact, one interesting study looked at a group of obese individuals, and for another group, they focused on their sleep. And what they found is that the people who slept better were actually the ones who saw changes in their body composition that lasted a while the exercise and nutrition people gained all their weight back after 6 weeks. However, I would argue that even if you're sleep deprived, the number one reason you should exercise regularly is to keep the habit alive. When things that are out of our control throw a wrench into the habits that we can control, a lot of times it finds us in a really awful place that we won't recover from for several months. And sleep-deprived exercise is no exception. If you've been in the habit of exercising 3 to 4 days a week for a number of months, and then all of a sudden you come upon something in your life that causes you to lose a bunch of sleep and so you don't work out, it could be another 3 or 4 months before you pick the habit up again. And then it takes another 3 or 4 months of doing that consistently before it becomes a habit all over again. So as I'm walking through these do's and don'ts, I want you to hear that I don't expect you to make significant progress in your fitness goals when you're exercising while sleep deprived. I'm sorry, that's not how the human body works. You need great sleep in order to recover adequately from your workouts and change homeostasis for the better. However, I will say that if you are sleep deprived, then exercise is about maintaining that habit despite those things that are ruining your recovery, so that when you are able to sleep well, you don't have to wrestle with the exercise habit. It's already there, and all that you'll see is significant improvement in the way exercise impacts your life. So let's talk about this list. Let's start with 3 don'ts. Don't number 1. When you're sleep deprived, don't perform explosive movements. So what's that mean? It could be in the gym and outside of the gym. In the gym are things like cleans, jerks, box jumps, hand clap push-ups, and even rope slams could all fall in the category of explosive movements in the gym. Outside of the gym, however, that might also mean that you can't perform your best or competitively in like a pickup game of basketball or an ultimate frisbee game. And why are explosive movements a no-no? Well, when you're sleep deprived, you are affected at a neurological level in a way that decreases your coordination. Which means that while in general, when you're performing explosive exercises, your body moves really well. Let's say you're going after a rebound and you spring off of one leg, and normally your body does a great job of catching the impact on the ball of your foot. Your calves actually work really hard to decelerate the movement against your knee. Your glutes work really hard to explode you in the other direction, and your obliques can pivot you really well. So everything works together well as a unit. But when you're sleep deprived at a neurological level, when you go to pivot really hard and explode the other direction, most of the time your muscles aren't firing as well as they could. And so the impact of that movement is actually taken by the only other thing that can take it, which is your skeletal structure. In this case, your ankle, your knee, your hip, and worst of all, your spine. And so, for many people, when they're sleep deprived and they perform explosive movements, their risk of injury goes through the roof. Personally, I experienced this for myself when my son was born. I kept on with my normal exercise regimen with a few changes, but one of those things that I kept doing were cleans, the Olympic lift cleans, which is a very explosive movement. I lightened the weight, but over time what actually happened is I found that my back couldn't handle it very well. I ended up with some neurological pain that caused some shooting pain down my left side, and with some help found that the issue was originating in my back, likely had inflammation in a disc caused by the uncoordinated explosive movements without recovery. So, the first piece of advice, don't perform explosive movements. You're just not as coordinated as usual, and your recovery is going to be pretty low, which means that even if you could perform them well without injury, the tissues that need to be recovered through good sleep just aren't going to, and you're going to cause undue stress and strain on your body. So number 1, if you're sleep deprived, don't perform explosive movements. Number 2, don't do long duration or high intensity work. There's a really important hormone in your body called cortisol. It goes by a number of names, but one of the things that we need to know about it is that when you're sleep deprived, your cortisol is going to be higher throughout the day. Cortisol is your stress hormone, your fight or flight hormone. It's the one whose job is to switch your body into sympathetic activation so you can deal with the stressors in front of you. Dads, when your son or daughter first came into this world and made you a dad and you had to go back to work within a couple weeks, your cortisol was super high because you still had to focus. You still had to do a good job. You still had to hit your quota. You still had to deal with customers. You still had to turn in projects on time, and you were not firing on all cylinders. And so cortisol went up in your bloodstream in order to increase your activation so that you can hang with the obstacles that were in front of you, even despite not recovering well. So what does that mean for exercise? That means that you should do exercise in a way that doesn't continually increase cortisol, because as good as cortisol can be to help you overcome obstacles, it's also catabolic, meaning that it breaks down tissue over time. So in this case, if you already have cortisol in your system and then you do exercise in a way that increases cortisol, you're not building your body up. In fact, you're speeding up the tearing down of good tissues in your body. Do you really want to lose lose any more muscle, dude? I figured the answer was no. And so, in times that you're sleep deprived, avoid long duration or high intensity work. Long duration is anything more than 45 minutes, which has been shown to steadily increase cortisol, and it's dose dependent. Every minute you go past 45 minutes, cortisol is going to continue to rise. So you endurance athletes out there, I'm talking to you. If you're sleep deprived, it's not a great time to continue your marathon or triathlon training. There are a number of definitions we can use for intensity proper, and today's not the day we're going to go into all of the different ways to define that. So for our part today, we're going to use a simple measure called rate of perceived exertion, RPE, which is basically, on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is this? A 1 is, dude, this is the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. I could continue doing this all day. A 10 is, I am literally going to die if you don't shut this treadmill off. So for our part, let's say high intensity work is 8 to 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 for rate of perceived exertion. If you're sleep deprived, let's keep everything below an 8. I know, that's not an exact measure, and like I said, we could use load, we could use heart rate, we could use rest periods, but if you're listening to this sleep deprived, it's probably not a great time to try to teach you something that technical and that new. So for your part, if it feels harder than an 8, stop it. And if you need a more technical definition, hang around, I'll cover acute variables eventually. So don't do long duration or high intensity work. Last on my list of don'ts while you're sleep deprived, don't, for the love of God, take a pre-workout stimulant to get through your workout. I know, it's tempting. I get it. You're sleep deprived, you feel like a zombie, you felt kind of crappy all day, and all you want to do is go to the gym or go for your run or whatever with a whole bunch of energy in your tank and burn a great workout. But remember, your cortisol is already high, and this is about working out in a way that's going to be beneficial for the long haul, not for instant gratification. So, a pre-workout stimulant, sure, it'll make you feel great, it'll give you the endurance and the focus and the strength to tackle your big lifts or to go farther and faster, and that's all well and good, but know that as soon as you put that in your body, what it's doing is it's actually raising the level of cortisol in your bloodstream. Remember the thing that's already high? That's eating away at your muscle tissue. It's raising that to an even higher level so that you can cash in on all of the energy that comes when it continually breaks down that tissue. Now, normally some nutritional factors called ergogenic aids can be fantastic as a pre-workout stimulant in order to be helpful to get the most out of your workouts. But remember, you're sleep deprived, and it's not likely going to change anytime soon. That's why this list exists. So hitting your workout super hard at the expense of your body's limited resources by using the aid of a pre-workout to help you feel a way that I promise you're not really is going to be harmful because you will not be able to recover from that great workout if you're not sleeping well. So on the don'ts, don't perform explosive movements, don't do long duration or high intensity work, and don't use pre-workout stimulants. Thanks for the Old Testament style don't list, Alex. Can you give me something positive to look forward to? You got it. So on the do's list, remember, working out while you're sleep deprived is not about making a whole bunch of progress. It's about keeping the habit alive, and I would argue it's about making the most out of a bad situation. In fact, you might even feel a bit better after you work out using these do's. So first of all, do something low intensity. Remember on the don'ts list, don't do high intensity. I'm telling you, do something low intensity. We can use the rate of perceived exertion scale again. On a scale of 1 to 10, we're looking at less than an 8. Which, if you're a little bit of a sadistic person in the gym, that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun to you. Why would I work out if I can't kick my own butt? I love AMRAPs, which are rounds as many reps as possible in a certain amount of time. And I like to incorporate things like the row machine or full body movements like kettlebell snatches among a circuit, and I attempt to get as many reps as possible. That's a great high intensity way to do metabolic conditioning if you know what you're doing. But when I was sleep deprived, instead of doing something like that, I might do a very similar circuit to the ones that I loved. However, I would limit myself to how much of each exercise I could do, and I would increase the rest periods in between so that my rate of perceived exertion wasn't high enough to increase my cortisol over that time period. So instead of rowing 500 meters and doing 10 snatches, 10 hand clap push-ups, 10 squat jumps, and 10 pull-ups for as many reps as possible in 7 minutes, Instead, what I did was a nice easy 500-meter row, a nice easy 10 snatches, a nice easy 10 push-ups, remember no claps, nothing explosive, 10 squats, and 10 pull-ups, with a solid 20 seconds of rest in between. And I would go through that circuit, not trying to get as many reps as possible, but completing it for 3 rounds. Now, for some of you, that sounds like sissy work. Go ahead and add 10 reps to each of that and then come talk to me. For some of you, that sounds like all of the work you've done in an entire month. And for that case, remember, the rate of perceived exertion is a subjective thing. So when you're sleep deprived, keep yourself under an 8 on that scale of 1 to 10 and do something low intensity. Low intensity exercise will help you be consistent in how much fat you're burning as a fuel source. Low intensity exercise can actually lower cortisol, and low intensity exercise can actually boost those good feeling endorphins when you're sleep deprived. Do number 2 on the list is do 30 minutes of exercise. Do 30 minutes of exercise. Remember, I said don't exercise for long durations. You need to exercise for less than 45 minutes. I'm telling you that on the do list, your workout is magically awesome if you can keep it at about 30 minutes. You can go 30 to 45 if you're feeling froggy, but you're probably not because you're sleep deprived. So 30 minutes is the time duration for your workout. And if you can do this 4 days a week, this is actually going to have a significantly positive effect on your growth hormone, your testosterone, your serotonin, and your insulin. All of those hormones are positively impacted by 30 minutes of exercise. The reason growth hormone, though, in this list is very important is because think of growth hormone as doing the opposite job of cortisol. When you're sleep deprived and you're not getting much growth hormone from your sleep pattern, it's going to be super important that your growth hormone is boosted by anything you can get out there, and 30 minutes of exercise is a very tried and true way to boost your growth hormone, which actually will help you with the damaging effects of cortisol. So do work out for 30 minutes. And then last on this list is get 10,000 steps per day. Now, if you've been listening to this show for a little bit, you know that I'm always advocating that you have some sort of active day. Talked about it with the tips for the holidays. I talked about it in response to some of our internet questions. I will promise you that I will continue to talk about it thereafter. But if you're sleep deprived, many times you feel like doing nothing. And granted, if you're in a blessed position while sleep deprived that you have nothing to do, go take a nap. Forget my 10,000 steps a day. But if you're not in a position to take a nap, I'm going to encourage you to be active. Remember, we're active at a low intensity. However, making sure that you get your 10,000 steps a day can do a lot to hinder or even reverse the effects of sleep deprivation on insulin, leptin, and cortisol. Now, insulin's important. You want to keep it nice and low in your bloodstream so that you're not in a state of fat accumulation and instead are in a state of fat burning. 10,000 steps a day can lower your insulin. Leptin's important because it tells you that you're full. And if there's a lot of insulin in your system from your sleep deprivation, then leptin won't be able to do its job. And so 10,000 steps a day by lowering your insulin will help your leptin stay nice and high in your bloodstream. What that means for you is less cravings and less likelihood to overeat while sleep deprived, which is a huge thing that leads to the dad bod when your first child is born. You can catch the information on the dad bod in our first episode. Dad bod is not your fault. I encourage you to check that out. But 10,000 steps a day is going to help to regulate your leptin better and keep you from all those crazy cravings that happen when you're sleep deprived. And then lastly, 10,000 steps a day seems to have a mitigating effect on cortisol. Your cortisol is high anyway because you're sleep deprived. Sorry, kid, there's no way to change that unless you can actually get some sleep. But if you sit around all day, that cortisol is going to stay relatively high in a stressful state. And perhaps counterintuitively, it'll continue to break down tissue in your body for energy, not because you need it, but because you're sleep deprived and your body sees that as an extreme stressor. So getting 10,000 steps a day or actually being active as often as possible in your day is going to tell your body, yeah, we're sleep deprived, but everything's cool. Chill out. And I mean, intuition bears this out, right? When you're really nervous about something, you always feel better if you set your mind and your body to getting something done rather than sitting around and wallowing in your nervousness, right? If you've ever had to make a public speech or there was some work that you really had to do, or you had a tough conversation coming up with your boss, for instance, you feel a lot better if you go clean the house or take a walk around the block or rearrange the garage rather than sitting in an office twiddling your thumbs waiting for the horrible thing to come to fruition. Similarly, your cortisol is already high in your body if you're sleep deprived, and therefore getting 10,000 steps per day actually has the same mitigating effect on cortisol as when you're nervous about something and you go do something about it. So get 10,000 steps per day. Man, I know sleep deprivation is hard stuff. I get it. I remember when Gabriel was really little, he was probably about 2 months old. I woke up from a dream and he was in the bassinet beside the bed and he was crying. And I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do it. I woke up and he's crying in the bassinet beside the bed and I'm like, oh my gosh, dude. So I pick him up in his bassinet. You know, he had just changed his diaper like 30 minutes ago. He'd already eaten on his mom 30 minutes ago. I couldn't do it anymore. It was the middle of the night. We've been sleep deprived for a while. And so I'm walking with his bassinet beside the bed and I just come out into the living room and I come out into the closet and I put the baby in the foyer out next to the door and I shut the closet door. So I shut the baby in the front closet door and I walked back to bed and I laid down and my wife says, "Where's the baby?" And then I was like, oh my gosh, he's in the closet. And I sat up really fast and I went to go get him and I looked and he was still there. It had all been a dream. I didn't actually put the baby in the closet. I was so sleep deprived that I dreamt that I put the baby in the closet because he was crying. But that's not how you know I was really sleep deprived. You know I was really sleep deprived because I was sitting up in bed at 2 a.m. My wife is sleeping soundly next to me. The baby's sleeping soundly next to her, which wasn't normal, but it was a nice peaceful moment. I'm sitting up in bed at 2 a.m. and I'm thinking, you know what? This kid should be sleeping in the closet. I thought it was a great idea. So men, if you're sleep deprived, I'm sorry. It's rough. Whether it's because of work, you got something going on that's keeping you up at night, you have a new baby in the house. I get it. It's not easy. Life is throwing a wrench in the good habits that you can control by throwing things at you that you can't control. I get it 100%. I hope that this list of do's and don'ts helps you so that you don't lose your workout habit while you're sleep deprived, but that you modify it in a way that's smart for you. Don't perform explosive movements and prevent some injuries. Don't do long duration or high intensity workouts and keep your cortisol as low as possible. Don't use a pre-workout stimulant to trick yourself into doing more work than you can recover from. Do some low intensity stuff to burn some fat, lower some cortisol, and keep your heart strong. Keep your workouts around 30 minutes to get the maximum growth hormone output you can from exercise, and get 10,000 steps a day so we can keep insulin, leptin, and cortisol all under wraps. Just because you're sleep deprived doesn't mean we can't keep a good habit alive. This has been Alex Van Houten at Defining Dad Bod. I hope this was a helpful show for you. Please pass it on for somebody you know who's sleep deprived and needs to hear these tips. And don't forget to help out the show by going to definingdadbod.com/donate. Your support helps us to spread the word to dads everywhere who need to hear the message that their body is an example to their children, and being in great health and great shape for themselves is going to help them raise a generation that can change the world. Until next time, guys, kick butt, take names.